Welcome, dear viewers. For more exclusive, thrilling stories every week, join our membership. Sit back, relax, and sip your coffee. Enjoy. The nightmare always starts the same way. I'm underwater, pressure crushing my lungs, the murky darkness of the Gulf pressing in from all sides. Above me, Deepwater Horizon 6 burns against the night sky. Orange flames licking upward like the tongues of ancient monsters. Below me, something moves in the depths. Something enormous and patient that's been waiting since before mankind first set foot on Louisiana soil. But the worst part isn't the fire, or the thing in the deep. It's the faces. My crew, suspended in the black water around me, skin sloughing off in strips, eyes milky white, mouths open in silent screams. And they're reaching for me, fingers stretching toward my face, not swimming but somehow moving closer. I wake up gasping, sheets soaked with sweat. The taste of Gulf water still in my mouth, though I've been on dry land for 3 days. My doctor calls it PTSD. Says it's normal after what happened, but there's nothing normal about what I experienced on that rig. My name is Marcus Thibodeau, born and raised in Morgan City, Louisiana, where the Atchafalaya River empties into the Gulf. I'm 36 years old, divorced, with a daughter I see every other weekend when I'm not offshore. Before last month, I was the night shift supervisor on Deepwater Horizon 6, a drilling platform about 70 miles southwest of Port Fourchon. Good money. Had to be for the risk and isolation. 18 years in the oil business, and I thought I'd seen everything the Gulf could throw at us. Hurricanes, equipment failures, the occasional injury. But nothing prepared me for what happened after we drilled past 30,000 feet. I wasn't supposed to be on that rotation. I was filling in for Ramon Delgado, who'd called in with food poisoning from some bad crawfish etouffee. The company helicopter dropped me at the platform on a Tuesday evening, the sun already sinking into the horizon, painting the sky and water in shades of crimson. Bad omen, my grandmother would have said. Le ciel en sang. The sky in blood. She was Cajun to the bone. Filled my childhood with stories of rougarou and fifelet and all manner of things hiding in the swamp. I never believed them. I should have. The platform manager, Bill Hutchins, met me on the helipad. Tall guy from Texas with a perpetual sunburn and a handshake like a vice grip. He didn't seem himself that evening. Distracted, jumpy. "Marcus," he said, voice tight. "Good to see you. Listen, Ramon usually handles the night shift and he's got a system. Some procedures that aren't in the official manual." I laughed. What, like his lucky hard hat or something? Bill didn't smile back. "There's a list in the supervisor's office, set of rules. They might seem strange, but they're important. The crew knows them. Follow them to the letter, you understand?" "Sure, Bill," I said, still thinking it was some kind of joke or initiation ritual. Maybe Ramon had put him up to it. 6 hours later, when I heard the first knocking from beneath the drilling platform, I realized it wasn't a joke at all. The supervisor's office was a cramped space at the end of the main hallway, walls covered in safety notices, equipment manuals, and a large diagram of the platform. A desk with 3 monitors displaying various drilling metrics took up most of the room. I settled into Ramon's chair, still adjusting to the constant hum and vibration that was life on an oil rig. On the desk, weighted down by a coffee mug emblazoned with "Laissez les bon temps rouler," was a worn manila folder. Inside, I found several typed pages with Protocol DH6-N printed at the top. Below that, in bold red letters, "Night shift procedures mandatory." The first page contained standard operating procedures. Nothing unusual. safety protocols, emergency contacts, shift change checklists. But as I flipped to the second page, the rules began to deviate from anything I'd seen in my 18 years of offshore work. Rule 1. Between the hours of 1 a.m. and 5 a.m., all external lights on the eastern side of the platform must be turned off. No exceptions. Rule 2. If the temperature in the drill shaft drops below 36 degrees Fahrenheit, immediately initiate emergency shutdown sequence 5C and evacuate all personnel from the lower deck. Do not resume operations until temperature returns to normal, minimum 3 hours. Rule 3. Should you hear knocking from beneath the platform, respond with exactly 3 knocks in return. No more, no less. Then proceed to the southern railing and drop 1 cup of fresh water into the Gulf. Rule 4. Any crew member who reports seeing lights beneath the water is to be immediately relieved of duty and confined to quarters until morning shift. Rule 5. If the radio picks up a voice speaking Cajun French, do not respond. Turn off all communications equipment for exactly 17 minutes. Rule 6. In the event of a drill bit replacement, the old bit must be destroyed completely, not discarded intact into the water. Rule 7. If you see a crew member you don't recognize, or if a known crew member appears disoriented unusual, ask them, "How's the weather in Huma?" The correct response is, "Wet this time of year." Any other response requires immediate containment in the panic room. I stared at the page, convinced it was some elaborate prank. Ramon was known for his sense of humor, but remembering Bill's expression, the tension in his voice, this didn't feel like a joke. As if summoned by my thoughts, my radio crackled. "Supervisor, this is Jenkins at the drill control. You might want to come down here." The drill control room was the heart of the operation, a wall of monitors and control panels that managed our intrusion into the Gulf's seabed. Jenkins, a weathered veteran with 30 years of experience, stood before the main pressure gauge, his face grim. "We just hit 30,012 feet, he said without preamble. "Pressure readings are unusual." I glanced at the gauge. The needle swung erratically, pulsing like a heartbeat. "Equipment malfunction?" I asked. Jenkins shook his head. "Calibrated it myself yesterday. This is real." He lowered his voice. "You read Ramon's instructions?" "Just finished." "You want to tell me what the hell is going on?" "Been on this rig 8 months. Ramon's rules kept us alive. Don't ask me to explain them, but ignore them at your peril." He tapped the pressure gauge. "Something's down there, boss. Something that doesn't want to be disturbed." Before I could respond, a low, resonant knock echoed through the control room. 3 distinct sounds, like metal striking metal, coming from beneath us. Jenkins paled. "That's Rule 3. Better answer it." My mouth went dry. "This is insane." "Do it now, or we'll all regret it." Feeling ridiculous, I knelt and knocked 3 times on the floor. The sound echoed metallically. "Now the water," Jenkins urged. "Southern railing, 1 cup, fresh water. Hurry." I grabbed a bottle of Kentwood Springs from the cooler, snatched a coffee mug from the counter, and hurried to the southern section of the platform. The night air was thick with humidity, the distant lights of other rigs twinkling on the horizon like earthbound stars. At the railing, I filled the mug, hesitated, then poured it over the side. The water seemed to hang in the air longer than it should have, as if reluctant to rejoin the Gulf. When I returned, Jenkins had pulled up the underwater camera feed. "Look," he said, pointing to the screen. The murky view showed our drilling equipment extending into the darkness, but just at the edge of visibility, something moved, large, sinuous, a darker shadow against the deep. "What the hell is that?" I whispered. "Don't know. Don't want to know." Jenkins switched off the feed. But we've got 4 more hours of night shift, and I guarantee that's not the last time we'll need to follow the rules. He was right. At 2:13 a.m., the temperature in the drill shaft plummeted to 34 degrees Fahrenheit despite the warm Gulf waters. We initiated shutdown sequence 5C and evacuated the lower deck. At 3:45, the radio crackled with a woman's voice speaking rapid Cajun French, my grandmother's native tongue. I understood enough to make my skin crawl. Laissez-nous monter. Nous sommes affamés. Let us up. We are hungry. By the time dawn broke, painting the horizon in gentle pinks and oranges, I'd followed 5 of Ramon's 7 rules. The crew avoided my questions, exchanging knowing looks, but offering no explanations. As I prepared for the morning shift handover, Bill appeared at my door. "Made it through the night," he said. It wasn't a question. "Barely. What the hell is going on, Bill? What are we drilling into?" He sighed, shoulders slumping. "Come with me. There's something you need to see." Bill led me through the maze of corridors to a section of the platform I'd never visited before. Unlike the well-lit main areas, this passage was dimly illuminated and ended at a heavy steel door marked "Restricted, Authorized Personnel Only." He punched a code into the keypad, and the door hissed open. "What I'm about to show you isn't in any company manual, Marcus. This stays between us and the night crew." Inside was a small room dominated by sophisticated monitoring equipment. 3 large screens displayed different views, one showing seismic readings, another thermal imaging of the seabed beneath us, and the third, what appeared to be some kind of sonar. A man in his 60s sat before the monitors, his weathered face illuminated by the screen's blue glow. He didn't look like the usual Transocean employee. He wore no uniform, just a faded LSU sweatshirt and jeans. "This is Dr. Etienne Mouton," Bill said, "oceanographer from Louisiana State. Company brought him in 2 months ago." Dr. Mouton nodded without taking his eyes off the screens. "You've had an eventful night, Mr. Thibodeau." "That's one way to put it," I replied. "Mind telling me what's going on? What are we drilling into down there?" He swiveled his chair to face me. "Something that's been down there a very long time. The company knew there was an anomaly in this region. Unusual seismic readings, magnetic disturbances. They thought it might be a large methane pocket. Very valuable." He clicked a few keys, and the central monitor displayed a 3D rendering of the seabed beneath the platform. A massive dark zone pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. "But this isn't methane, is it?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "No." Dr. Mouton pointed to the image. "We believe it's organic. Living." My mouth went dry. "Living? You mean like a whale or much larger and much older?" He switched to another image, this one grainy and difficult to make out. "This was captured 3 months ago when we first breached the outer membrane." The image clarified slightly, and I had to grip the edge of the console to steady myself. What looked like an enormous eye stared back at the camera, its pupil contracting in response to the light. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. "Not quite," Dr. Mouton said grimly. "But people once worshipped it as something similar. The Chitimacha tribe of southern Louisiana had legends about Nakshito, the great fish that sleeps beneath the waters. Colonial accounts from the early French settlers mention tribal warnings about waking that which sleeps in the deep. So Ramon's rules, protocols developed through trial and error, Bill interjected. After we disturbed it, things started happening. Strange things. We lost 3 men before we established the patterns." "Lost? You mean they died?" Bill and Dr. Mouton exchanged glances. "Not exactly," the doctor said carefully. "They changed. began acting erratically, complained about voices in their heads. Then they tried to damage the platform. Specifically, they tried to disable the emergency shut-off valves on the drilling equipment. As if something wanted us to keep drilling, I murmured, the implication sinking in. Precisely, Dr. Mouton nodded. When we restrained them, their physical deterioration accelerated. Skin lesions, rapid weight loss, eyes clouding over. Within 48 hours, they were unrecognizable. Where are they now? Another uncomfortable glance between them. They escaped, Bill said flatly. Broke out during a storm 3 weeks ago. Dove into the Gulf. We never found the bodies. The doctor tapped a few keys, bringing up footage from a different camera. But we did find this 2 days later. The video showed the underside of the platform. 3 figures clung to the support structures, humanoid, but wrong. Limbs too long, movements jerky and unnatural. Their skin had a grayish, waterlogged appearance, and when one turned toward the camera, its eyes were milky white. That's Harkins, Bill said quietly, pointing to the figure on the left. Was our assistant driller, family man, 2 kids in Lafayette. I felt bile rise in my throat. And you're still drilling? After this? Company decision, Bill replied, not meeting my eyes. Too much invested to pull out now. Besides, as long as we follow the protocols, maintain the, I guess you'd call it a relationship with what's down there, incidents are minimal. Minimal? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Those were people, Bill. They had families. Which is why the night shift protocols exist, Dr. Mouton cut in. Each rule addresses a specific behavior we've observed. The knocking, for instance, it's a form of communication. Answer correctly, provide the water offering, and it remains. Not friendly, but at least not actively hostile. And if we don't answer, the pressure builds. If ignored long enough, support structures begin to fail, as if something massive is pressing against them from below. A sudden realization hit me. The temperature drops in the drill shaft. It's approaching the surface, Dr. Mouton nodded. Coming up to investigate. The emergency shutdown and evacuation gives it time to retreat. My head spun with the implications. Why me? Why am I here if this is so dangerous? Bill at least had the decency to look ashamed. Ramon's been doing this for months. The stress. He's not sick with food poisoning. He had a breakdown. Started talking about taking a boat out to one of the abandoned platforms nearby. Said they were calling him home. We needed someone experienced, Dr. Mouton added. Someone who knows these waters, understands the industry, someone who could handle the pressure. And if I can't, if I decide to walk away? That's your right, Bill said. But the company's offering triple pay for night shift supervisors now. $300,000 for a 6-month rotation. The figure hung in the air between us. With that kind of money, I could pay off my debts, set up a college fund for my daughter, maybe even buy back the family home in Morgan City that I'd lost in the divorce. Before I could respond, an alarm blared from one of the monitors. Dr. Mouton swiveled back to the screens. Movement, he said tersely. Something's rising from the depths. The sonar display showed a massive shape ascending toward the platform, moving with deliberate purpose. Depth? Bill demanded. 500 meters and climbing. Fast. Initiate Protocol Omega, Bill ordered. Now! Dr. Mouton's fingers flew across the keyboard. Red warning lights began flashing throughout the room. What's Protocol Omega? I asked, my heart pounding. Emergency drilling halt and full sensor blackout, Bill explained as Dr. Mouton worked. Makes us invisible to it. Usually works. Usually? The doctor interrupted before Bill could answer. It's stopping. Hovering at 300 meters. We watched in tense silence as the massive shape on the sonar paused its ascent. After what felt like an eternity, It began to sink slowly back into the abyss. Bill let out a breath I hadn't realized he was holding. Crisis averted. For now. This happens often, I asked. More frequently lately, Dr. Mouton admitted. It's becoming more active, more aware of our presence. The protocols are working less reliably each week. Which means what exactly? Bill placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. It means we need you, Marcus. Need your experience, your local knowledge. Because you think whatever's down there is going to break through. It wasn't a question, but Bill answered anyway. Yes, and when it does, we need to be ready. I didn't sleep after my first night shift. How could I? Each time I closed my eyes, I saw that massive shape rising on the sonar, Dr. Mouton's grim face illuminated by the screen's blue glow, the transformed workers clinging to the underside of the platform like barnacles, human barnacles with milky eyes. Instead, I paced my small cabin, Ramon's list of rules clutched in my hand, reading them over and over until I had them memorized. By the time the afternoon sun began its descent toward the horizon, I had made my decision. The money was too good to walk away, and if something was stirring beneath the gulf, something ancient and dangerous that could turn men into monsters, someone needed to be here who gave a damn about the people on this rig. At 5:30 p.m., I made my way to the mess hall. The day shift workers were finishing their meals, the atmosphere surprisingly normal. Jokes about the Saints' chances this season, complaints about the gumbo not being as good as someone's grandma made it. Did they know what was happening beneath them? The night crew sat at a separate table, quieter, exchanging significant glances. My crew, now. I filled my tray and joined them. 5 men, all veterans of offshore drilling. Jenkins from drill control, Washburn the heavy-set mechanic, Lee, our electronics specialist, Cooper, young but experienced, handled the robotic submersibles, and Santiago, former Navy, now our safety officer. All of them had been on DH-6 for at least 6 months. All of them knew the rules. So, I said once I'd settled in, who's going to tell me what we're really dealing with down there? Silence fell over the table. The men exchanged glances again. Finally, Santiago spoke, his voice low. You've seen Mouton's data? I nodded. Data doesn't tell the whole story. He pushed his half-eaten meal away. You know the Mississippi River dumps millions of tons of sediment into the Gulf every year, right? Builds up the seafloor, especially in this part of the basin. Sure, I said. Basic geology. 3 months ago, we drilled past what should have been bedrock. Instead, we hit something organic, something that bled. Bled? My appetite vanished instantly. Jenkins leaned forward. Black fluid, thick as molasses, smelled like rotting meat and crude oil mixed together. Damn near evacuated the rig from the stench alone. That's when it started, Washburn added. The knocking, the temperature fluctuations, the voices on the radio. And the workers who changed, I prompted. Cooper, the youngest, shuddered visibly. Harkins was my friend. We played poker every Saturday. When he started changing, he told me he could hear singing coming from beneath the water. Said it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever heard. 3 days later, Lee continued, his skin started sloughing off in the shower. Not bleeding, just peeling away in strips. Underneath was this gray, rubbery stuff, like shark skin, but wrong somehow. He wasn't scared, Cooper said, his voice hollow. That was the worst part. He smiled the whole time. Said he was becoming perfect. Said soon we'd all understand. A chill ran through me, despite the hall's warmth. And the company knows all this. They're still making us drill. Santiago's laugh was bitter. Welcome to corporate America, boss. They think whatever's down there might be more valuable than oil. Some kind of biological discovery, pharmaceutical potential, they said. That's insane, I muttered. People are dying, worse than dying. Which is why we follow the rules, Jenkins said firmly. They work mostly. Keep it pacified. Tell him about Guidry, Cooper said suddenly. The table fell silent again. Jenkins shot Cooper a warning look. I need to know everything, I insisted. No holding back. Santiago sighed. Antoine Guidry, local guy from Cocodrie, started having dreams about a month after we breached the membrane. Said he could see underwater in these dreams moving through the Gulf without scuba gear. Said something was guiding him, showing him things. What kind of things? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Old things. Shipwrecks no one's discovered. Ruins under the silk that shouldn't exist this far west in the Gulf. And other platforms, abandoned ones from the 80s oil bust. Santiago's eyes met mine. Platforms where he said the changed ones were gathering. A cold weight settled in my stomach. He went looking for them, didn't he? Jenkins nodded grimly. Stole one of the lifeboats during the shift change. Coast Guard found the boat 3 days later, drifting empty near an abandoned platform about 15 miles southwest of here. Platform was barricaded shut, chain wrapped around the access ladder. Chain looked fresh. You think the changed workers did it? I asked. We think Guidry found what he was looking for, Lee said quietly, and something made sure he couldn't come back to tell us about it. The intercom crackled to life, saving me from having to respond. Night shift personnel, report to stations. Repeat, night shift personnel, report to stations. As the others gathered their trays, Washburn placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. One more thing you should know, boss. The rules, they keep changing. What worked last week might not work tonight. It's learning, adapting, testing our limits. Wonderful, I muttered. Any other good news? Yeah, he said, his expression dead serious. Don't go out on the platform alone after midnight, no matter what you hear or see. With that ominous warning, we made our way to our stations. The day shift workers looked relieved to be leaving, practically running to the helicopter pad. By 7 p.m., the night crew had taken full control of the platform, and the true isolation of our situation settled over me like a shroud. The first few hours passed uneventfully. I checked in with each station, reviewed drilling data, and monitored the special sensors Dr. Mouton had installed. Everything normal, or as normal as things could be when you're drilling into something ancient and alive beneath the Gulf of Mexico. At 10:42 p.m., I was in the supervisor's office reviewing seismic logs when the first incident occurred. The lights flickered briefly, and the temperature dropped noticeably. I checked the environmental controls, functioning normally. Then my radio crackled. Supervisor, came Lee's voice, tight with tension. East side camera 3 is showing something in the water. I switched my monitor to the camera feed. At first, I saw nothing but the dark waters of the Gulf reflecting the platform's lights. Then, I noticed movement. Ripples spreading in concentric circles from a central point about 50 yards from the platform. Something was rising. Rule 4, I muttered to myself, reaching for the protocols. Any crew member who reports seeing lights beneath the water is to be immediately relieved of duty and confined to quarters until morning shift. But these weren't lights, just movement. The radio crackled again. Marcus, Lee's voice had dropped to a whisper. It's glowing now. I looked back at the monitor. He was right. A faint blue-green phosphorescence had appeared where the ripples originated, growing brighter as whatever was causing it rose closer to the surface. Rule 4 didn't specify glowing, just lights. Close enough. Lee, you're relieved. Go to your quarters and stay there until morning. But, now, Lee, that's an order. I heard him swear in Mandarin, then, yes, sir. Lee out. I switched to the general channel. All personnel, we have an incident on the east side. Follow Rule 1 immediately. I repeat, implement Rule 1. Within minutes, the eastern side of the platform went dark as the external lights were shut down. I kept my eyes fixed on the monitor, watching as the glow beneath the water grew brighter, then began to move, circling the platform like a massive luminous shark. The radio came to life again, this time with Jenkins' voice. Supervisor to drill control, ASAP. I hurried through the corridors, the emergency lighting casting eerie shadows. Jenkins was standing at the main console, his face illuminated by the glow of the instruments. Temperature in the shaft is dropping, he said without preamble. 38 degrees and falling. Rule 2. If the temperature in the drill shaft drops below 36 degrees Fahrenheit, immediately initiate emergency shutdown sequence 5C and evacuate all personnel from the lower deck. How fast is it falling? About a degree every 30 seconds. At this rate, we'll hit 36 in 1 minute. I've finished for him. Start the shutdown sequence. I'll order the evacuation. Jenkins nodded and began typing commands into the system. I grabbed the PA microphone. Attention all personnel. This is Supervisor Thibodeau. Initiate emergency procedure 5C. All lower deck personnel evacuate immediately. Repeat, all lower deck personnel evacuate immediately. Alarms blared throughout the platform as the shutdown sequence began. I could hear the heavy thud of the watertight doors closing automatically, sealing off sections of the rig. 36.5, and still dropping. Jenkins reported, his eyes fixed on the gauge. Then, without warning, every light on the platform went out. The emergency generator should have kicked in immediately, but they didn't. We were plunged into absolute darkness. "Jenkins?" I called out. "Still here," came his reply, surprisingly steady. "Don't move. Don't make any loud noises. The generators..." "It's not a malfunction," he cut me off, his voice barely above a whisper. "This has happened before. It's listening." Listening for what? Before he could answer, a sound echoed through the darkness, a wet, sliding noise coming from the direction of the drill shaft. Then another sound, one that turned my blood to ice. Footsteps, slow and uneven, accompanied by a rhythmic dripping. Something was on the platform, something that had come up from below. Through the darkness, I heard Jenkins whisper, "It's broken Rule 2. In the pitch darkness of the control room, I froze, barely breathing. The footsteps drew closer, a shuffling, dragging sound, followed by that unsettling drip. The air temperature had plummeted. Each breath came out as a visible plume in the faint glow of the few emergency indicators still functioning. Then came a sound I'll never forget. A wet, gurgling intake of breath, as if someone were trying to breathe through fluid-filled lungs. "Jenkins," I whispered. "What do we do?" His reply was so quiet, I almost missed it. Rule 7. Ask the question. Rule 7. If you see a crew member you don't recognize, or if a known crew member appears disoriented, unusual, ask them, "How's the weather in Huma?" The correct response is, "Wet this time of year." Any other response requires immediate containment in the panic room. The footsteps stopped just outside the control room door. A hand slapped wetly against the metal, then began to turn the handle. My throat constricted with fear, but I forced the words out. "How's the weather in Huma?" The door opened slowly, revealing the silhouette, backlit by the faint red glow, of a distant emergency light. Water pooled around its feet, spreading across the floor in dark tendrils. Cold, came the reply, the voice garbled and distorted, like someone speaking underwater. So cold in the deep. Wrong answer. I felt Jenkins tense beside me. The figure took a shambling step into the room. In the dim red light, I could make out features that were almost human, but wrong. Skin glistening with moisture, hanging loosely in places as if partially dissolved. Its eyes reflected the light like a cat's or a deep-sea creature's. "Harkins," Jenkins breathed. Recognition and horror mingled in his voice. The figure's head snapped toward Jenkins, those reflective eyes fixing on him. Jenkins, it gurgled. Come with us. Be beautiful down there. We're evolving. Becoming perfect. I backed away slowly, groping behind me for anything that could be used as a weapon. My hand closed around a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. "The panic room!" Jenkins hissed at me. "We need to—" Harkins, or the thing that had once been Harkins, lunged forward with unexpected speed. Jenkins cried out as the creature seized him, wet hands closing around his throat. I swung the fire extinguisher with all my strength, connecting with the side of the thing's head. There was a sickening, squelching sound, but Harkins didn't release Jenkins. Instead, it turned those reflective eyes toward me, mouth opening impossibly wide to reveal rows of needle-like teeth that no human should possess. I squeezed the extinguisher's trigger, blasting the creature full in the face with chemical foam. It reeled backward, making a high-pitched, keening sound, hands releasing Jenkins to claw at its eyes. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Jenkins by the arm. We sprinted through the corridor, the creature's inhuman wails echoing behind us. The panic room was on the upper deck, designed as a secure shelter during hurricane evacuations. If we could reach it, we'd be safe, at least temporarily. As we ran, emergency lights began flickering back on, casting the corridors in a stuttering, disorienting glow. We rounded a corner and nearly collided with Santiago and Washburn, both armed with makeshift weapons, a wrench, and a length of pipe. "Something's on the platform," I gasped. "We know," Santiago said grimly. "Cooper spotted Guidry on the southwest corner, or what used to be Guidry." "There are two of them?" Jenkins asked, his voice cracking. "At least," Washburn confirmed. "We're gathering everyone at the panic room." Before any of us could move, the PA system crackled to life, broadcasting a series of wet, clicking sounds, followed by words in Cajun French. The same phrase repeated over and over in a chorus of distorted voices. "Laissez-nous entrer. Nous sommes affamés." "What are they saying?" Washburn demanded. My grandmother's voice seemed to echo in my head, teaching me the language of our ancestors. "Let us in. We are hungry." The lights flickered again, and in the momentary darkness, something moved at the end of the hallway, a silhouette of wrong proportions, water streaming from its elongated limbs. "Move!" Santiago shouted, and we raced toward the stairwell leading to the upper deck. Behind us, multiple sets of wet, slapping footsteps pursued. The sound of dripping water grew louder, as if a pipe had burst. The air grew colder with each step. We burst through the stairwell door onto the upper deck. The night air hit us like a physical force, warm and thick with Gulf humidity after the unnatural cold below. Ahead, the panic room's reinforced door stood open, Cooper waving frantically from inside. "Hurry!" he shouted. "We can't hold it much longer." We sprinted the final distance, diving through the doorway, just as Cooper and Lee began to push it closed. Through the narrowing gap, I caught a glimpse of gray, glistening figures emerging from the stairwell. 3, 4, 5 of them, moving with that same uneven gait. The door sealed with a hydraulic hiss, locking mechanisms engaging automatically. We collapsed onto the floor, gasping for breath. "Did you see them?" Lee asked, his face pale with shock. "Their eyes." "Where's Dr. Mouton?" I interrupted, noticing the oceanographer's absence. Cooper shook his head. Monitoring station. He refused to leave his equipment. And Bill? Helicoptered out this afternoon, Santiago said bitterly. Convenient timing. I looked around the panic room. 6 of us had made it. Me, Jenkins, Santiago, Washburn, Cooper, and Lee. The room was designed to sustain a full crew during hurricane evacuations, with food, water, medical supplies, and an independent power source. What about the rest of the night crew? I asked. Silence fell. Then Santiago spoke, his voice hollow. We're it, boss. The rest. We heard screaming from the lower deck after the power went out. By the time we got there, he didn't need to finish. I slumped against the wall, the reality of our situation settling like a stone in my gut. We were trapped on a platform 70 miles from shore, surrounded by transformed crew members who had once been our colleagues, with something ancient and hungry stirring in the depths below. The protocols failed, Jenkins said, voicing what we were all thinking. It's learning, adapting. What do they want? Cooper asked, his young face lined with fear. To feed, came Lee's quiet reply, or to transform us, make us like them. A heavy thud sounded against the panic room door, then another. The creatures outside were trying to get in. Will this hold? I asked, eyeing the reinforced door. It's designed to withstand hurricane-force winds, Santiago answered. But those things, they're strong and determined. Another impact, harder this time. The door shuddered but held. We need to call for help, Washburn said, moving to the communications panel. Mayday to the Coast Guard. And tell them what? Jenkins demanded. That we're being attacked by fish zombie former colleagues? They'll think it's a prank. Tell them there's been a catastrophic failure, I suggested. Platform instability. Request immediate evacuation. Washburn nodded and began transmitting the distress call. I turned to the security monitors, flipping through camera feeds to assess our situation. What I saw chilled me to the bone. At least a dozen transformed crew members shambled across the platform, more emerging from the water with each passing minute. They moved with purpose, securing locations, disabling equipment. This wasn't mindless aggression. It was coordinated, strategic. And at the drilling controls, a figure that had once been Dr. Mouton worked methodically, overriding safety protocols, restarting the drill. They're not just hunting us, I realized aloud. They're trying to free it. Free what? Cooper asked. I pointed to the seismic monitor in the corner of the panic room, still receiving data from Mouton's equipment. The massive shape we'd seen earlier was rising again, this time with nothing to stop its ascent. Whatever's down there, I said. Whatever changed them, and I think it's finally coming up. The panic room fell silent as we watched the monitors. On one screen, transformed crew members, I couldn't bring myself to call them zombies, though the term hovered at the edges of my thoughts, continued their assault on the door, taking turns ramming against it with inhuman strength. On another, the thing that had been Dr. Mouton worked at the drilling controls, movements jerky but precise. No response from the Coast Guard, Washburn reported, setting down the radio handset. Too much interference. Something's blocking the signal. Santiago cursed under his breath. Helicopter won't come until scheduled pickup at 0600. That's 7 hours away. We won't last 7 hours, Jenkins said, voicing what we were all thinking. Not with what's happening out there. I turned to the seismic monitor again. The massive shape continued its steady ascent, now just 200 meters below the platform. Whatever it was the size of a small office building and moving with deliberate purpose. We need to stop the drilling, I decided. If they're trying to free that thing, we need to shut it down. How? Cooper demanded, gesturing at the screens. We're trapped in here and those things are out there. The emergency shutdown, Lee suggested. There's a manual override in the main control room that cuts all power to the drilling equipment, complete killing of the systems from the ground up, which would trap whatever that is back down in the deep. I nodded. But someone would have to get to the control room. A heavy silence fell over the group. The control room was on the main deck, and we'd have to navigate past multiple transformed crew members to reach it. I'll go, Santiago said finally. Former Navy SEAL, I've got the best chance. Not alone, I replied. I'm the supervisor. I know the override codes. Jenkins shook his head. Too risky. We need another option. There isn't one, I insisted. Look at the monitors. That thing is getting closer every minute. Once it reaches the surface, I don't want to find out what happens then. As if to punctuate my words, the entire platform shuddered violently, metal groaning under sudden stress. The monitors showed waves rippling outward from beneath the rig as something massive displaced the water below. Okay, Jenkins relented. But not just the two of you. We all go. Safety in numbers. I considered this. 4 of us. 2 stay here, maintain communication, be ready to let us back in. We quickly formed a plan. Santiago, Lee, Jenkins, and I would make the attempt, while Cooper and Washburn remained in the panic room, monitoring our progress through the security cameras and coordinating our movements. We armed ourselves with whatever could serve as weapons, fire extinguishers, wrenches, a flare gun with 3 flares. Remember, I told the others as we prepared to leave, these were our colleagues, our friends, but whatever's inside them now isn't human. Don't hesitate if they come at you. Santiago checked the small window in the panic room door. Momentarily clear. They're regrouping at the drill controls. Now's our chance. With a final nod to Cooper and Washburn, we unsealed the door and slipped out onto the deck. The night air hung heavy with Gulf moisture, unusually still. The platform's lights cast harsh shadows across the metal walkways. In the distance, I could hear the unnatural chorus of transformed workers, their voices blending in that same repeating phrase, Laissez-nous entrer, nous sommes affamés. We moved in formation, Santiago taking point, Lee and Jenkins in the middle, me bringing up the rear. Every few yards, Santiago would signal a halt, check around corners, then wave us forward. The platform felt alien now, hostile. The familiar walkways and equipment turned sinister in the half-light. Movement at 2 o'clock, Santiago whispered, gesturing toward a cluster of equipment. 2 of them. Through the shadows, I could make out a pair of figures huddled over something on the deck. The remains of a crew member, I realized with horror. They weren't eating it exactly, but seemed to be changing it, their hands working methodically over the corpse. As we watched, the dead man's chest heaved, and milky eyes snapped open. They're converting the dead, Lee breathed. Making more of themselves. Alternative route, Santiago decided, leading us down a maintenance ladder to a lower level. The detour cost us precious minutes. By the time we reached the central junction that would lead to the control room, Cooper's voice crackled over our handheld radios. "You've got company," he warned. 3 coming up behind you, 2 more approaching from the helipad direction. "Trapped," Jenkins hissed. "Options?" I asked Santiago. He scanned our surroundings, eyes landing on the narrow utility passage. "Through there. It'll be tight, but they might not follow." We squeezed into the passage, a claustrophobic tunnel of pipes and electrical conduits. The metal was slick with condensation, making our progress slow and treacherous. Behind us, I could hear the wet slap of transformed workers' feet on the deck, drawing closer. "They're at the passage entrance," Cooper's voice came again. "But they're too altered to fit. Buying you some time." We emerged on the other side, now just 1 level below the control room. A maintenance ladder would take us directly up. Almost there, I encouraged the others, trying to ignore the way the platform had begun to vibrate continuously beneath our feet. Santiago went up the ladder first, then we. Jenkins followed, with me bringing up the rear. As I placed my foot on the first rung, a cold, wet hand closed around my ankle. I looked down into what had once been Harkins's face, now a grotesque mask of glistening gray flesh and two sharp teeth. Those reflective eyes fixed on mine as it pulled, trying to drag me down. "Marcus!" Jenkins shouted from above. I kicked frantically, my work boot connecting with the thing's face. It didn't flinch, didn't react to pain as a human would. Instead, it opened its mouth and bit down hard on my boot. I felt those needle teeth puncture the leather, just grazing my skin. With a desperate surge of strength born of pure terror, I kicked again, this time knocking the creature backward. It lost its grip, tumbling onto the deck below. I scrambled up the ladder, heart thundering in my chest. Santiago helped pull me onto the upper level, quickly checking me over. "Did it get you?" he demanded. "Just my boot," I assured him, though the spot where those teeth had grazed my skin burned like ice. We were now on the same level as the control room, just 30 yards of open deck between us and our goal. But the way wasn't clear. 4 transformed workers blocked the path, including the thing that had once been Dr. Mouton. "Cooper," I whispered into the radio. "Status on the drilling?" "Bad," came the tense reply. "Whatever Dr. Mouton did, it's accelerated the process. They've overridden all the safety protocols. Drills going at maximum speed. And the entity? 100 meters and rising fast. Platform stability at 60% and dropping." As if to confirm his words, a violent shudder ran through the rig, nearly knocking us off our feet. In the distance, I heard the screech of tearing metal. "We're out of time," Santiago said grimly. "Direct approach. I'll draw them off. You 3 get to the control room." Before any of us could protest, he stepped out into the open, raised the flare gun, and fired. The flare streaked across the deck, exploding in a burst of red light that illuminated the nightmarish scene in stark relief. The transformed workers turned as one, heads swiveling unnaturally toward the source of the light. Santiago was already running, leading them away from our position, his footsteps ringing on the metal decking. "Now!" Jenkins urged, and we sprinted toward the control room. We were halfway there when the platform heaved violently, throwing us to the deck. A deafening roar filled the air, not mechanical but organic, the sound of something vast and ancient giving voice to its rage or hunger. I looked up to see a massive shape breach the surface beside the platform, a glistening mountain of flesh rising from the gulf. In the platform's lights, I caught glimpses of features that defied comprehension. Ridges of armored skin, great pits that might have been sensory organs, a mouth large enough to swallow a helicopter. "My God," Lee whispered beside me. The control room was just ahead. We scrambled to our feet, racing the final distance as the platform continued to heave and groan beneath us. Inside, the control room was a scene of chaos. Monitors flashed with warnings. Alarms blared from multiple stations. The main drilling controls had been physically altered, critical safety mechanisms disabled or bypassed. "Jenkins, secure the door," I ordered, moving to the emergency shutdown panel. It had been tampered with, the protective casing pried open, wires exposed. "Lee, can you fix this?" I asked, stepping aside. Lee examined the damage, his expression grave. "Partially. I can't trigger a full shutdown, but I might be able to initiate a pressure release in the drill shaft. It would slow things down, maybe push that thing back." "Do it," I said, then turned to Jenkins. "Get Santiago on the radio. Tell him to get back to the panic room." Jenkins tried the radio, receiving only static in response. He's not answering. Another violent tremor shook the platform, this one strong enough to crack one of the reinforced windows. Through the spiderwebbed glass, I saw the entity continue to rise, massive tentacular structures now visible, wrapping around the platform's support legs. "Got it," Lee announced, his fingers dancing over the exposed wiring. Initiating pressure release in 3, 2, 1. A series of explosions echoed from below as emergency valves blew open, releasing the immense pressure in the drill shaft. The platform lurched sickeningly, listing to one side as the entity reacted to the sudden change. "Did it work?" Jenkins asked, bracing himself against a console. On the monitors, the seismic readings showed the massive shape hesitating, its ascent momentarily halted by the pressure release. But it wasn't retreating. "It's adapting," Lee said, pointing to the readings. "The pressure release is only buying us time." The radio crackled to life, Cooper's panicked voice breaking through. "Whatever you did bought us a few minutes, but the platform's integrity is failing. Support struts are buckling. We have maybe 20 minutes before structural collapse." 20 minutes. Not enough time for the helicopter, even if we could somehow contact it. "The lifeboats," I decided. "It's our only chance." "The transformed workers are all over the launch areas," Jenkins pointed out. "Then we fight our way through," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Get everyone from the panic room to the southeast lifeboat station. It's the furthest from where that thing is rising." As we gathered to leave the control room, Lee suddenly grabbed my arm, pointing to one of the security feeds. On the screen, Santiago was cornered on the helipad, surrounded by transformed workers. He fought valiantly, keeping them at bay with a length of pipe. But there were too many. As we watched in horror, they overwhelmed him, dragging him to the edge of the platform. What happened next would haunt my nightmares forever. Rather than killing him, they forced him over the side, not into the gulf, but directly into a pulsating appendage of the entity that had risen alongside the platform. Santiago struggled briefly, then went rigid as he was absorbed into the glistening flesh. "Jesus Christ," Jenkins breathed. "We have to move," I said, tearing my eyes from the screen. "Now." As we turned to leave, a wet, strangled voice came from the doorway. "No one's going anywhere." Dr. Mouton stood there, or what remained of him, flanked by 3 other transformed workers. His skin hung in loose gray folds, those same reflective eyes fixed on us with predatory intensity. "The Nox Chitto rises," he gurgled, water spilling from his mouth with each word. "You will be part of its awakening. All of you." Behind him, more shapes appeared in the corridor, blocking our escape. We were trapped. "How's the weather in Huma?" I asked desperately, clinging to Rule 7 even as I knew it was useless. These things had evolved beyond our protocols. The transformed Mouton tilted his head at an unnatural angle, milky eyes narrowing. "The Buvy weather is perfect for rebirth," he gurgled, water spilling down his chin. "You will all see soon." The platform shuddered again, metal screaming under impossible strain. The entity outside was still rising, tightening its grip on the support structures. "We need a distraction," Jenkins whispered beside me. Lee's eyes darted around the control room, landing on the fire suppression system. "I have an idea," he murmured. "Be ready to move." Before I could ask what he planned, Lee lunged for the emergency panel and slammed his fist against the Halon fire suppression button. Klaxons blared as the system engaged, flooding the control room and adjacent corridors with dense, choking gas. The transformed workers reacted immediately, writhing and emitting high-pitched keening sounds as the Halon hit their waterlogged tissues. In the confusion, Jenkins shoved past them, creating an opening. "Run!" he shouted. We burst through the gap, racing down the corridor toward the panic room. Behind us, the inhuman shrieks of the transformed crew echoed off metal walls, punctuated by the platform's continuing structural protests. "Cooper!" I shouted into my radio as we ran. "We're coming in hot! 4 transformed crew on our tail!" "Copy that," came the tense reply. "Doors ready to open on your signal." We rounded the final corner, the panic room door just 30 yards ahead. But halfway there, the deck beneath us buckled violently, metal plating tearing open to reveal the black water below. Jenkins, leading our group, barely managed to leap across the widening gap. Lee wasn't so lucky. His foot slipped on the edge, and he fell, barely catching himself on a jagged piece of torn decking. "Lee!" I shouted, dropping to my stomach at the edge, extending my hand. Behind us, the wet slapping of the transformed workers' feet grew louder. Lee looked up at me, then past me to the approaching threat. Something shifted in his expression. Resignation, perhaps, or resolve. "Get to the lifeboat," he said quietly. "I'll hold them off." "No, take my hand." He shook his head, already pulling himself up onto the opposite side of the gap from us, the side where the transformed workers were approaching. "Someone has to slow them down," he said, drawing himself up to face the oncoming threat. "Go!" Jenkins grabbed my shoulder. "He's right. We have to move." With a final, agonized look at Lee, who now stood with his back to us facing the approaching horde, I turned and followed Jenkins toward the panic room. The door hissed open as we approached, Cooper and Washburn pulling us inside before slamming it shut again. "Where's Lee?" Cooper demanded, his young face pale with fear. Through the small window in the door, I watched as Lee met the transformed workers, head-on, fighting with desperate courage. They overwhelmed him quickly, but his sacrifice bought us precious minutes. "He didn't make it," I said, the words hollow in my mouth. "Santiago?" Washburn asked. Jenkins shook his head. "Gone. Taken by that thing outside." The monitors in the panic room told the story clearly. The platform was failing, structural integrity down to critical levels. The massive entity continued to rise, now fully breached, its incomprehensible bulk pressing against the rig's support structures. "The lifeboats," I said, forcing focus through the grief and horror. "It's our only chance. Southeast Station." "Not possible," Cooper replied, pulling up a camera feed. "Look, the lifeboat stations were overrun with transformed workers. Dozens of them now. More than we'd realized existed. All moving with that same unnatural coordination. Some were crew I recognized. Others must have come from elsewhere. Perhaps other platforms that had already fallen. They're guarding every escape route," Washburn observed. "Why not just kill us?" Cooper asked, his voice rising with panic. "Why trap us?" A terrible realization dawned on me. Because they meet us alive, for conversion. Jenkins frowned. "What do you mean?" "Remember what happened to Santiago. They didn't kill him. They fed him to that thing. And now look." I pointed to the monitor showing the helipad where Santiago had been taken. A new figure had emerged from the water, shambling onto the platform, but this one moved differently, more smoothly than the others. As it stepped into the light, I recognized Santiago's features, transformed but more perfect than the other changed workers. His skin wasn't hanging in strips, but had a smooth gray sheen. His movements were fluid, purposeful. "It's evolving," I whispered, using Santiago as a template to create something better. "So what's the plan?" Washburn demanded. "We can't stay here. The platform's breaking apart. We can't reach the lifeboats. What options do we have?" An idea formed in my mind. Desperate, probably suicidal, but better than waiting to be converted. "The diving equipment," I said. In the underwater maintenance bay. If we can reach it, maybe we can swim away from the platform, far enough to avoid both the transformed workers and the collapse. Swim? Cooper echoed incredulously. In the Gulf? At night. With that thing out there. You got a better idea, I challenged. Silence was my answer. The underwater maintenance bay was located on the lowest accessible level, equipped with diving gear for emergency repairs to the platform's submerged structures. If we could reach it, we might have a chance. Slim, but better than none. How do we get there? Jenkins asked. The transformed workers are everywhere. I studied the platform schematics on one of the monitors. Maintenance shafts, I decided, tracing a route with my finger. Tight spaces they'd have trouble navigating with their altered forms. We can access them 3 levels down, then work our way to the bay. The platform shuddered again, a deep structural groan that seemed to come from its very foundations. Cooper, I turned to the youngest member of our group. How long until complete structural failure? He consulted the readouts, face grim. 15 minutes, maybe less. No time to waste. We gathered what supplies we could: flashlights, a first aid kit, a toolbox that might provide improvised weapons. I checked the security feeds one last time, plotting our route. Ready? I asked, looking at each man in turn. Washburn nodded grimly. Jenkins set his jaw, determination hardening his features. Cooper looked terrified, but gave me a shaky thumbs up. I unsealed the panic room door, and we slipped into the corridor beyond. The platform's dying groans masked our footsteps as we made our way toward the access hatch that would lead us to the maintenance shafts. The first obstacle came at the central junction. 2 transformed workers blocking our path, their backs to us as they worked on something I couldn't quite see. I signaled the others to wait, then raised the wrench I'd brought from the panic room. What happened next occurred so quickly, I had barely time to register it. One moment, I was preparing to ambush the transformed workers. The next, they both turned simultaneously, as if sensing our presence. But instead of attacking, they stiffened, heads tilting to listen to something I couldn't hear. Then, ignoring us completely, they shambled away toward the eastern side of the platform. "What the hell?" Washburn breathed. "Don't question it," Jenkins urged. "Move." We hurried past the now empty junction, reaching the access hatch without further incident. Cooper spun the wheel, and the hatch swung open to reveal the narrow maintenance shaft below. "I'll go first," I said, lowering myself into the opening. "Cooper last. Close the hatch behind you." The shaft was claustrophobic, barely wide enough for a man's shoulders, descending vertically for about 20 feet, before opening onto a horizontal passage. The air was stale, thick with the smell of machine oil and rust. One by one, we descended, Cooper sealing the hatch above us. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness, revealing a maze of pipes and conduits running alongside the narrow crawl space we now occupied. "This way," I whispered, orienting myself using the mental map I'd formed from the platform schematics. We crawled in silence, the platform's continuing deterioration evident in the way the metal around us groaned and shifted. Twice we had to detour around collapsed sections, adding precious minutes to our journey. Finally, we reached the access point that would lead us to the underwater maintenance bay. I pressed my ear against the hatch, listening for any sound of transformed workers beyond. "Seems clear," I murmured, then slowly turned the wheel. The hatch opened onto a large, dimly lit space filled with diving equipment, underwater tools, and a moon pool, an opening in the floor that provided direct access to the sea below. The bay appeared deserted. "We made it," Cooper whispered, relief evident in his voice. "Don't celebrate yet," Jenkins cautioned, moving to secure the hatch behind us. "We still need to." He never finished the sentence. A violent impact rocked the platform, throwing us all to the floor. The lights flickered, then died, plunging us into darkness broken only by our flashlight beams. "What was that?" Washburn gasped. A second impact followed, even more powerful than the first. Through the floor, I felt rather than heard a deep, resonant call, like whale song but lower, more ancient, vibrating through the very structure of the platform. The entity was calling. And then, from every direction at once, came the answering call of the transformed workers. That same phrase, chanted in unison through waterlogged vocal cords. "Laissez-nous entrer. Nous sommes affamés." "They're coming," I realized aloud. "All of them. Here." "Why?" Cooper asked, frantically pulling diving equipment from storage racks. The answer came to me with terrible clarity. "The moon pool. It's the closest access point to the entity. They're gathering to, I don't know, join with it, feed it. Whatever they're planning, we're in their way." Jenkins threw me a diving suit. "Then let's not be here when they arrive." We worked with desperate speed, donning the suits over our clothes. They were commercial diving rigs, heavy but self-contained with their own air supply. I had just sealed my helmet when the first transformed worker burst through the far door, the new, evolved version of Santiago, moving with predatory grace. "Hurry!" I shouted through the suit's communication system. Washburn, closest to the moon pool, was the first to enter the water, disappearing into the dark gulf. Cooper followed, then Jenkins. I was last, 1 foot on the ledge when Santiago's transformed hand closed around my air hose. The abandoned platform Jenkins had mentioned gradually took shape in the distance, a skeletal structure rising from the seabed, dark and silent, its productive life long since ended by economics or disaster. As we approached, I could make out the rusted supports, the crumbling deck high above. "There," Jenkins called. "There's an emergency ladder on the southeast leg." We changed course slightly, heading for the massive support structure he'd indicated. Behind us, the transformed workers pursued relentlessly, their altered bodies perfectly adapted to underwater movement. Washburn reached the ladder first, grabbing the lowest rung and pulling himself up. Jenkins followed close behind. I lagged several yards back, every movement now a supreme effort of will against my failing body. As Washburn climbed higher, something shot from the darkness of the platform's understructure. A pale, elongated arm, ending in webbed fingers with vicious claws. It seized Washburn around the waist, yanking him from the ladder. "No!" Jenkins shouted, reaching for him but missing by inches. Washburn's scream filled the comm system as he was dragged into the darkness beneath the abandoned platform. His dive light spun wildly, illuminating glimpses of multiple figures. Transformed workers who had claimed this structure as their own. "It's a trap," I gasped into the comm. "The platform. They're already here." Jenkins hesitated on the ladder, looking back at me, then up at the dark platform, then to the open water where Washburn had vanished. "We have to keep moving," he said finally. "Up is our only chance now." He was right. With transformed workers in the water behind us and more waiting in the darkness below the platform, our only hope was to climb above the waterline, where perhaps they'd be less agile, less adapted. I reached the ladder at last, my arms feeling like lead as I grabbed the lowest rung. Jenkins was already 20 feet up, climbing steadily toward the surface. I followed, each step an agony of effort. As I climbed, the cold numbness continued to spread through my body. My vision was changing too, the darkness becoming less absolute, shapes more distinct in the gloom. I could sense the transformed workers circling below, waiting, watching. I could feel their anticipation, their hunger. Worse, I was beginning to understand it. "Jenkins?" I called, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "I'm not going to make it." He paused in his climbing, looking down at me. Even through his dive helmet, I could see the realization dawn on his face. "You're changing," he said, not a question. "Since the control room. Harkins bit through my boot." Jenkins was silent for a long moment. "How long do you have?" "Not long, I can feel it. It's in my head now." Whispering. Another silence. Then, "What's it saying?" I listened to the voice that had been growing steadily louder in my mind. Ancient, hungry, patient. It's saying this was always going to happen, that we woke something that should have stayed sleeping, that we're food and vessels. Both. "Keep climbing," Jenkins urged. "Fight it." I continued upward, though each rung was harder than the last. We passed the waterline, the gulf falling away beneath us as we ascended the massive support leg. The abandoned platform loomed above, dark against the night sky. My arms seized suddenly, muscles locking as a spasm ran through my body. I clung to the ladder, fighting to maintain my grip as something shifted inside me, bones grinding as they began to change configuration. "Jenkins," I gasped. "I'm out of time." He had climbed a few yards ahead but stopped again, looking down at me. After a moment's hesitation, he descended until we were face to face on the ladder. "I'm sorry, Marcus," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Not your fault." Another spasm rocked my body, stronger this time. I could feel my skin loosening, preparing to slough away. "You need to go. Get as far from here as you can." "And then what?" "There's no escape from this. You saw what happened at the rig. This thing, whatever it is, it's fully awake now, and spreading." He was right. The entity's emergence wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. I thought of Morgan City, of Port Fourchon, of New Orleans, of my daughter. "There has to be a way to stop it," I said, fighting to keep my thoughts coherent as the whispering in my head grew louder. "To warn people." "I'll try," Jenkins promised, "if I make it off this platform alive." We both knew his chances were slim. The transformed workers would be waiting above, just as they had been below. Another convulsion hit me, this one strong enough that I nearly lost my grip on the ladder. Jenkins reached out to steady me, then drew back as he saw the changes beginning to manifest visibly. My diving gloves splitting as webbing formed between my fingers. "Go," I urged. "Now, before I can't. Before I try to stop you." Jenkins nodded once, his expression hidden behind his helmet visor. "Goodbye, Marcus. Goodbye, my friend." He resumed climbing, quickly disappearing into the darkness above. I clung to the ladder, feeling the transformation accelerate now that I had stopped fighting it. The cold had spread throughout my body, and with it came a strange new strength, a heightened awareness of the water below, of the currents and movements within it. The whispering in my head resolved into clear thoughts. Not mine, but not entirely alien either. Images flashed through my mind, the entity rising fully from the gulf, its massive form moving toward the shore. Transformed workers spreading out from oil platforms and fishing boats. Coastal communities changing, adapting, evolving to serve the ancient thing from the deep. I understood now what it wanted. What it had always wanted since first being disturbed by our drills. Not just freedom, but dominion. The gulf was just the beginning. With the last remnants of my humanity, I made a choice. I wouldn't be part of this. I wouldn't become a vessel for this invading consciousness. I released my grip on the ladder. The fall seemed to last forever, the wind rushing past my helmet as I plummeted toward the gulf below. I hit the water hard, the impact driving what little air remained from my lungs. As I sank into the darkness, I tore away my helmet, welcoming the rush of seawater. Better to die as Marcus Thibodeau than live as something else. As consciousness faded, I had one final terrifying thought. I could still hear the whispering. Even in death, it wasn't letting me go. And somewhere far above, Jenkins climbed alone into darkness, carrying a warning no one would believe until it was too late. 3 weeks after the destruction of Deepwater Horizon 6, a shrimp boat discovered Thomas Jenkins clinging to a piece of driftwood 10 miles off the coast of Grand Isle. Severely dehydrated, suffering from exposure and exhaustion, he babbled incoherently about monsters in the Gulf and ancient things rising from the deep. The Coast Guard report classified the incident as a tragic industrial accident, with Jenkins as the sole survivor experiencing severe PTSD and delusions. Transocean Energy issued a press release blaming the platform's destruction on a catastrophic equipment failure, announcing generous compensation packages for the families of the deceased. The media covered it for a day or two before moving on to more pressing stories. The official death toll: 27 workers, including Marcus Thibodeau, night shift supervisor. I know all this because I read it in the Morgan City newspaper while sitting in a coffee shop on Front Street, watching the Atchafalaya River flow past on its journey to the Gulf. My name isn't important. What matters is that I used to work night security at Terrebonne General Medical, where they kept Jenkins under observation for 2 weeks before transferring him to a psychiatric facility in Baton Rouge. I was on duty the night he escaped. Found his room empty during my 3 a.m. rounds, the window broken from the inside. The security footage showed him moving with surprising strength and speed for a man who'd been bedridden for days, his movements strangely fluid, almost unnatural. 2 nights later, my cousin who works for the Port Fourchon Harbor Police called me in a panic. They'd found an abandoned boat drifting near an old oil platform. Inside was a waterlogged journal with Jenkins' name inside the cover and a hastily scrawled note. "It's spreading. The rules don't work anymore. Stay away from the water." That was a month ago. Since then, there have been reports. Nothing official, just whispers among the fishing crews and offshore workers. Unusual fish catches, with specimens showing strange deformities. Electronic equipment failing without explanation near certain areas of the Gulf. Most disturbing, a growing number of people gone missing from coastal communities. Cocodrie, Leeville, Cameron, Grand Isle. Always the same pattern. They leave for a late-night fishing trip, or a walk along an isolated stretch of beach. They don't return. Sometimes their boats are found, drifting empty. The authorities blame rip currents, or drug runners, or simple accidents. But those of us who've worked the Gulf for generations, we know better. Something has changed in these waters. You can feel it when you stand on the shore at night. A watchfulness, a hunger, a patient malevolence that wasn't there before. I'm leaving Louisiana tomorrow, heading inland as far as I can get. Before I go, I'm posting copies of this account, along with Jenkins's recovered journal, to every online forum I can find. Most will dismiss it as fiction, a creepypasta for late-night thrills. But maybe someone will recognize the truth. If you live near the Gulf Coast, I have one piece of advice. The rules that once protected us don't work anymore, but there's one rule that might save you. Stay away from the water, especially at night. Don't answer if you hear knocking on your hull or pier. Don't investigate strange lights beneath the surface. And if someone you know starts talking about beautiful singing coming from the Gulf, or begins spending all their time staring out at the water, lock your doors. Because what woke up beneath Deepwater Horizon 6 is still out there, still hungry, still spreading. And Marcus Thibodeau? Sometimes the shrimpers say they see a figure standing on the site where the platform went down, silhouetted against the moon, watching, waiting, warning. But nobody ever gets close enough to be sure.